If you're the kind of senior engineer, architect, or technical leader who people look to for what's next, QCon London is probably already on your radar. Join us in London from March 16 to 19, where we go deep on the topics that matter, like the architectures you've always wondered about, engineering productivity, and applying AI in the real world. This isn't about trends for their own sake. It's about getting practical insights from senior practitioners to help you make smarter calls on where to invest your time and tech. With software changing fast, QCon London is the conference that helps you lead the change. Learn more at qconlondon.com.
Good day, folks. This is Shane Hastie for the InfoQ Engineering Culture Podcast. Today, I'm sitting down with Joe Cassavaugh of Puzzles by Joe. Joe, welcome. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Thanks so much for having me here. This is going to be a pleasure. I already know. So,
I'm happy for your confidence, and I'm looking forward to an interesting conversation. But my normal starting point with these is, who's Joe?
Well, Joe is the Joe of Puzzles by Joe, first of all. I'm 68 years old. I've been doing the Clutter series since I was 52. I started out as a little programmer 2 years out of college. I started on Key Punch way back. I was a math guy. I went to a good engineering school. I thought I was going to be a teacher. That didn't happen. And the rest is just a very curvy path of how I ended up here. And I've switched over to at least games adjacent in about 1991, 93, I think. And then real game, when I did a game called Mahjong Quest between 2005 and 2009, and that was part of the casual market boom. And if people aren't aware of what the casual market boom is, that's a PC download casual market is where they figured out women over 40 with some disposable income would actually buy games if they were the right kind of games. And the right kind of games were not RPGs or first-person shooters. They were more like solitaire, three-ball match, that type of stuff. Anyways, IT guy for years, and then finally made the switch into doing it myself. So that's who I am, I think, on one level.
We might dig deeper into who you are on other levels as we go through the conversation, but let's see how we go. So, solopreneur, game developer for 16 years, and it's successful. That's almost a unicorn.
Definitely a unicorn. I think of myself as a purple unicorn almost at times. But I've only started thinking of the solopreneur label about 5 or 6 years ago. Before that, I was really just trying to get out the next game and surviving. I started thinking in terms of sustainability way back in Clutter 3, really, but I didn't really achieve it until about 5 years ago. So in a nutshell, why I think I'm successful enough, and I'm going to give you this just 2-second one. It took me 10 years to make my first million net to me. It took me only 5 years to make my second million. And that's the interesting part of my story from both the tech, building sustainability, and starting thinking of myself in terms of business more than, I did a talk after Clutter 3 13 years ago called Business Before Pleasure. So I always had this on my mind of trying to be sustainable. But I got more serious along the way and notched it up whenever I realized, this is going to be around long term. And there were several things. One of the interesting pivot points is actually about 6 years ago, I went to Unity finally. And that changed because up until doing that, I worked in an environment for 10 years, but I knew I was going to leave that environment. So it's like having a house you're going to move out of. You're not going to fix up everything. And as soon as I went to Unity, I knew that was going to be my forever environment, really. So I could justify anything I could think of that I'm going to use 3 or 4 years down the road, I could justify doing right now. don't put it off. Let's do it. And let's do it right enough, good enough, etc., so that I could get faster. And ask me about commodity at some point down the road.
So thinking of the audience, the people we're talking to today, they're technologists. They are looking at what are their career options. Obviously, right now, the industry is in disruption. It has been over the decades multiple times. You and I both are of a similar vintage. And yes, I also did program on punch cards. And we've seen these cycles. I think there are unique aspects to the current cycle, but they're still cycles. If I think of the technologist who's wondering about what are his options, her options, how do they choose? What advice would you give them about going down that solopreneur path?
Well, I worked for iWin for 5 years during the boom. I made 3 games called Mahjong Quest 1, 2, and 3, and they made them way too much money, and I was getting paid well, but not the money they made. And even though timing has a lot to do with how a game is successful or not, I felt like I didn't get what I should have gotten for doing those games. And at some point, I decided that I didn't really want to be what I called a hired gun anymore. I didn't want to work for it. But before that really happened, I pitched over and over again different games to iWin, who I was working for. I was actually an employee. And they constantly got turned down, what I call death by committee. And they finally half greenlit this game. They greenlit it enough that I was working on, I spent a good 7-8 months on it. And it was about halfway done when 2 other games they did bombed. The market had gotten tight. Like any market, by the way, a market usually has a gold rush, and then it has a glut, and then a slow decline. And that's what happened to the PC casual download market. When they pulled my game, I was traveling to New Hampshire with my future wife, and she turned to me and said, "Can you do the game yourself?" And really, up until that point, it had never occurred to me. It really didn't. I was sort of happy working for other people to a degree, because I always felt like I could get that next job. I could just move if things, I'd moved enough in my career and I got along with most people. Plus, I was pretty good as a software engineer, not great. I think I was a great debugger, and I think I did things other people didn't do, but I didn't leave the best code behind me. And even though I wasn't a prima donna, getting along with other people was not my strength. But when she said that to me, and all of a sudden, wow, this person will support me doing it by myself, I immediately went, no, but something close enough. And that's when I seriously started considering, going out on my own. And immediately I liked the idea. And I knew the market well enough that I knew I could get 100,000 eyeballs, that all I had to do was create a game that was good enough to a target demographic. It wasn't a game for me. And that if I did this, if I got enough eyeballs, I could survive. And that's what led to me. And from that point on, all I'm doing is experiments and learning things. And that's kind of my life viewpoint, is you have all this common sense knowledge or what the bosses believe or what the market believes or everything, but it's not all true. There's a lot of cognitive bias going on. So anyways, I decided, prove I could do it. And I did just well enough to keep going. And for the first couple of games, that's all I cared about, was replacing my need to work for somebody else. But then things started shifting, and I got more and more. I give talks to game dev people, and one of my favorite things I ever did, which I now think of as a little bit arrogant, but I did it for a purpose. I have a slide that says the best game I ever played was the game of how to make money creating games, and the score is in dollars. And then it lists a bunch of things it isn't, which was the point, because I'm talking to these kids right out of college, game dev. But the point of making the game is not how beautiful you think it is, how much your friends like it, how many awards you won, in this little contest or whatever. what matters is, the bottom line. And at that point, I really started shifting. At the same time, I realized my Clutter series was truly a commodity. And if you're making a commodity, all that matters is how quickly can you get out the next one of a certain level. Coffee is a good example of what a commodity is. And nobody cares how shiny that coffee can is. All they care about is getting that next can of coffee. And they don't want it in a year. They want it in 6 months or 3 months or whatever. And the quicker you can be, and that's where the tech side comes in, of me doing this. Anyways, the more I focused on that and refactoring myself to have fun and not make it a grind, that's what I've done for 15 years. And really, the nicest thing about what I've done in this path is if you do it right and you do end up with something that you own. In my case, it's digital IP. It doesn't have to be that. Even if I did not make another Clutter game, my games that are already out there, I'm about to release the 19th one, would bring in 300,000 to 400,000 over the next 2 or 3 years in the trickles, in the long tail. And it's allowed me freedom, to think more about how I got here, how the games have evolved. The games are really strange in that I chit-chat with the player throughout most of my games. And there's a long story of how that happened, but I don't believe any other game is doing that. And I was allowed to do that because I cultivated my audience to get feedback while trying to create games better for them. One of the key points to all this is I believe most of what I've done isn't that special. The specialness is finding a niche that I decided was worth experimenting with and cultivating. In the talk I'm about to give at QCon, I use a bonsai tree as sort of the metaphor of what I think I've done. It didn't start out that way, but it's turned into that I feel responsible to my players. One analogy I try to wrap my brain around is I've created a pizza shop that people like my pizza. And I'm very careful with how I nurture my customers and give them that next slice of pizza. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
I want to lean into a point you made earlier there.
Yeah.
You didn't build a game for yourself. How did you realize that you are not the target audience? Because what I've seen a lot with technologists is we fall in love with our technology.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Oh, by the way, that's one of the points. It's not for you learning a new skill. It's not for, the game's going to make money. I don't care if you use the latest engine or, it doesn't matter. What matters is you made the new game. I agree with you 100%. People fall in love with the technology. So I spent 5 years at iWin. I was hired to do this Mahjong game because even though it's a solitaire thing, it's a little bit logic based, which is why I like it. I ended up doing 3 of them. And then I saw all the different genres out there for our target demographic, which is, again, casual PC download. If you look at a site like Big Fish, you see hidden object games, you see card games, you see match games, etc. And for the last 2 years at iWin, I was pitching a different idea. And they all just got shot down. And my mantra became, you pick the genre, I'll write a game good enough. So when my game that I wanted, which was a little close to the hidden object, Clutter, by the way, is this hidden object game, but it's really an unhidden object game. It's this huge pile of just photorealistic objects. You pick off 2 at a time and you keep going. Very dead simple. If 15 years ago you said you can write 19 games using this one thing, I would have gone, you're crazy. So when I had to do it myself, I immediately picked the most popular titles. Hidden Object had taken over the casual download space. In fact, it caused games to be double priced. It blew up. There was a game called Mystery Case Files. It's what really put them on the map. And I decided to go after that demographic. Because again, I've been saying for 2 years, you pick the genre, I'll do a good enough game. And now when I'm on my own, it's, the buck stops here. I had to put my money where my mouth was. So I wrote a game that would appeal to them without being hidden out. And then I put all myself into it. One of the things I like about a game that I loathe about games, I hate games that have a nice little puzzle in them and then you can't replay it. Like Myst. I loved the first Myst game, but there was this log bridge maze and you can only play it once because now you know it. All my games, every level is replayable. It's randomly generated, which is where I have my fun. And again, I was catering to my audience from the beginning. So much so, I put these mini games that were more like, for me, that were logic-based within the game. And it took me about 4 games before I realized my players do not care for the mini games. And I cut them out totally. I decided I could do clutter variations that looked different enough to fill the spots that I was using the mini games for. And throughout the 19 variations of clutter, I have pushed my customers more and more towards a little brainier, a little bit more thinking. It's becoming closer to a game that I would like over time. Put it that way. And I've nudged them and built enough of a rapport and trust that they've come along with me.
Let's talk about that 19 games. What's the, and you used the term when we were chatting earlier, the franchise effect. What's that doing for you?
It keeps me ahead of the market, the shrinking market curve. So let's get into just some quick numbers. Each game I put out is worth $100K, but it doesn't have $100K in sales. It makes about 40 or 50 right off, but it keeps the rest of the franchise alive. And that makes the other 50 until this one finally is making the 100 by itself by being out there long enough. So the first game only made $50,000 over a year and 3 months. If I never made a second game, that game would have made $60,000. That game has now netted me $250,000. And all the numbers I'm using are net to me, by the way. That's dollars net to me after the distributors have taken their piece, etc. Other than tax, I have to pay tax. Obviously, it's my regular income, but that's all net to me. So for the last 5 years, I've reached a pace where I put out 2 games a year, which works out to be about $200,000 a year. One of the things we didn't talk about is you stick around long enough and other good things happen. And people have approached me for different things. People have ported. There's been a mobile experiment. I'm on PlayStation and Switch, but somebody else ports it and splits with me. Doesn't make much money. My meat and potatoes is with the distributors, the casual distributors. You know, my first game still brings in $1,000 a month, easily, consistently, every month. It's just amazing. Each game goes out and makes plus or minus 10% of the last one. But over time, it all just, the trickle is there. Another way to look at it is this. My soft income is about $12,000 a month, a little higher maybe. So that's 144, 150K right there, soft. That I'm still making that even when I haven't put out a game in 6 or 7 months. Now, if I stop making out games totally, that would go slowly down. 12,000, couple more, maybe 11, maybe it would dip below 10 even. But it hasn't dipped below 10 for probably 5, 6, 7 years now. Okay. And again, each chunk that goes out is at least 40 bump right off that 3 or 4 month bump. And that's how, if you put out 2 games a year, if you think 10's the lowest, that's 120 and you get the 2 bumps for 40 each. That's another way to look at the 200K. And again, it's not quite that because I haven't really, it's not quite 2 games a year, but I still make that, 200K. The big thing is to make sure the quality is good enough. Early on, I learned this is a valuable thing for anybody doing anything. Don't listen to the haters. If you have figured out a product to sell at all, any product, do not listen to people that don't like your product. Listen to people who love your product and are still complaining about something. And then remove what they're complaining about. If you try to please the people that don't like your product, you're going to water down your product. and you're just going to make nobody like it. One of the things I preach when I do talk to the game devs, if you've made a game and everybody goes, it's a pretty good game, and they all go, oh yeah, it's a pretty good game, and nobody hates it, and but they all, hey, pretty good, and some people go really good, you've made a pretty crappy game. I was very happy that my very first game was a love me or hate me game. That first Clutter game was half the people could not understand how anybody wanted to play the game, and the other half were just addicted and loved it. I knew right then I was at least that I'd done the job.
The danger of mediocrity. It's okay.
Yep. You want to be polarizing in a game. And I don't mean, again, it wasn't polarizing ideas. It was just people said the most boring game ever, looks like a student project, awful, just awful. For the second one, somebody was mad at one of my distributors for even distributing the game, which a person hates your game when they don't think anybody should be allowed. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But you don't listen to them. And over time, my conversion rate now when I dump out a game is about 20%, which is just really, really high. Because most people have already decided. That's another nice thing on the distributor. Most people have already decided. Occasionally I get somebody new. And I will say, my wife does pottery, gorgeous pottery. But if you have a passion for something and you can choose between digital and a real world something, you go digital. Digital is so much better in the long run. It just is. It's the gift that keeps on giving. If you own your own IP. And even, I know I'm not huge. It's small. It's just good. I'm not Candy Crush. I am not Tetris. I don't care. It's enough for me, and I have no boss, which is one of the big motivations for me, putting the effort into going solo. I have a little thing in my talk where I say you have to be able to look in the mirror and ask yourself these really tough questions if you're going to go it alone and be a solopreneur. And the most important question of that is, there's two at the end. There's, what are you going to risk by doing it? But more importantly, what do you risk by not doing it?
From the point of thinking of somebody who's considering this is a possibility for me,
right,
what's the biggest gotcha to avoid, the mistake you avoided, that somebody thinking about going down this path should be very wary of or aware of?
The biggest mistake everybody makes, from CEOs down whatever, do not mistake luck from skill. Okay? There has to be some luck. Man plans, God laughs. The market's brutal. At one point, my fifth game really kicked butt. Not sure why. It's sad. It was just, in hindsight, it was an anomaly with maybe only one distributor that was enough that I noticed it with everything else. But it was really an anomaly there. And it led me to my worst decision. I ran into two young people that were type A's right out of college. And I decided that for Clutter 6, I would let them do the story and art. And we did a more conventional Clutter. And I had already done some stuff where I chit-chat with the players and stuff. And what happened was, that was my best looking game. Producer and marketing types loved it. But it performed poorly. It cost me about 12 grand when all the other games cost me nothing, or almost nothing. And my customers complained that there wasn't enough Joe-ness, and they thought I sold them out by having these other two people do stuff, even though I was involved at everything and okayed everything and input. And I just didn't do the hard work of actually writing the thing or doing, the art. I let them do it. And I only did that because I had enough buffer. Right? I was feeling like, oh, pretty good. I'm off to the rail. I'm going to be making $300K a year soon, is what looked like the projections. And I took longer to do the game because it just taught me a lesson. And it led me here because we were already doing the game after with those two people when I got the results in, and I just immediately cut it out, said, nope, we're done. Paid them, we're done doing this, a sequel of that sort of. And I did this game called Clutter Infinity, Joe's Ultimate Quest. where I upped the Jonas. I told the story. This is wild. I was 62 at the time. I told a little story within the game as the reward. Every time you play a puzzle in the main quest, which is in every game, anywhere from 50 to 100 levels, you get a picture, a quote, and some chit-chat. The first couple games was more of a real story. Then it became one about game dev and me chatting about myself. In this one, it was a story about, for every year of my life, how did I end up being the guy that ended up being the guy that ended up creating clutter? I started with this story about my bad left eye. I have 3 jock brothers. I grew up in a jock family. And when I say jocks, we were all jocks, sort of. But I was also the brainy math guy. And the reason I was the brainy math guy is I have a bad left eye. And because of that, I didn't enjoy playing catch with my father as much. And he did the books for the local Legion at night, and he was an accountant during the day. I watched him doing the books because I wanted to spend time with him that wasn't catching a ball. And I learned long division before I was in first grade. And I say, if it wasn't for the bad left eye, I'd be more like my brothers and probably would not have gone to an engineering school and no clutter. And then I said, and I fell in love with, long division. What's long division? It's a bunch of little rules that if you do them right, little steps, you get the right answer. It was my first algorithm. And even though I didn't really do computers till sort of after college, I was already in love with algorithms in general and so forth. That game, by the way, kicked butt. Didn't do as well as 5, but it did much better than 6. And now the gloves were off of, I think I can do anything I want as long as I'm true to myself and keep going. And at that point, I knew I wasn't going to ever do a game with another person. I wasn't going to go down that route again.
But lean into the Jonas.
Yeah. It's. I can't even describe how weird that's gotten. It's part of what keeps it fun for me. How do I make it less of a grind for me? And how can I have it fun? And how can I push it so that each game's slightly different while still being true to what they want? This game, Clutter 19, is actually called Clutter 19 Survey Says What? And it's because I promised them in the last game that this game was going to be for them, so I gave them a survey. And this game was supposed to be called This Game's for You. And it got changed because of the survey results. But I get to talk this whole meta thing about what the survey taught me. And it's all just fun. But it's one of the reasons some people hate the game. They can't believe my pictures in the game occasionally. They can't believe I chit-chat with the player. They think that's the big ego thing. They thought the first game, which talked about clutter a lot and gave clutter tips, how to declutter your life. Some of the negative reviews said it was a self-help book masquerading as a game. So it's been a hysterical ride. I hate the fact that story has to be in all games, that people have this story bias, that story is all important in the game dev world. Narrative. And I'm like, somebody somewhere should study my games for the narratives I've been able to pull off that if people looked at them closely would go, you're nuts. They'd be amazed that all I do is chit chat with my players and that counts as the story. And they seem to enjoy it from the feedback I get.
I've certainly enjoyed our chit chat today, so I can understand.
I don't know how helpful I've been.
So, Joe, lots of interesting stuff there. If people want to continue the conversation, where do they find you?
Well, I do have a website. You can search.
Joe, thanks very much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you, Shane. Total pleasure.